What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Yanez, and I, we have a special guest today, Chandler Smith. Now, Chandler and I have known each other for a long time. This dude is a total badass. When I think about who's a badass in the CrossFit space, instantly I go to Chandler Smith. Wrestled at West Point. He's a husband. He's a multi-time CrossFit Games competitor, competes in a bunch of other events as well. I think you have a High Rocks coming up, if I'm not mistaken, Chandler. But we're like super stoked to have you on the show. And just fired up to get some of your insight and see how things are going right now. But we just started talking, and you're at a mutual friend of ours, Noah Olson's house. And you were asking me, like, when I was competing, if there was like relationships like that where you had like this kind of buddy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say as much as you guys got it, man. You guys got something special going on, man. And tell us a little bit more about kind of like that relationship, because it seems like you both want to level each other up, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely been something that's kind of gone with me throughout my whole journey in the CrossFit space. I started in 2010. I remember watching sectionals videos, and there was one of Spencer Hindell that first got me going, but I also watched the Every Second Counts documentary and saw stuff with you. And I remember specifically, I was like, this guy looks like a body type that I could have. And so it's also just like a huge honor to be on the show, because this is the type of thing that, you know, a decade and a half ago when I was first getting started, I would have never imagined it'd be hanging out at Noah Olson's house and talking on a podcast with Jason Khalipa. Like, that's stuff that would have really rocked my world. So life is sometimes stranger than fiction. But yeah, we've had a super good rapport. I did my first like big event in regionals 2016, and him and I just kind of hit it off out there. And I came back a little bit later that year to train during the summer. I was still doing Army stuff, but I had some leave and started training. We're around the same age. I've been a huge fan of his, even in college. One of my roommates used to train at his gym down here in Miami, and he got me a piece of merch from there. And I literally wore a hole through it, because I was like, maybe if I wear this shirt all the time, I'll get as fit as Noah. But it's been really cool. Like, over the course of my time in this space and all the other spaces and everything else I do, like, had the chance to roll with Gordon and Ngannou and throw down at Riches and like all this sort of stuff like that. You know, without that, it just really wouldn't have even seemed like a type of thing that could have happened in the past. So I've got to do some really cool stuff because I like to do burpees, and that wasn't really like a career option even when I was getting going. So it's just wild that it's real life.
Dude, I love it, man. I love it. I want to ask, I know Gabe. So Gabe, what High Rocks are you doing?
I'm doing Houston. So me and Jason did Dallas pro doubles. And the funny thing is, at that race, I'm blanking on his name. I know his Instagram handle, Hybrid Raccoon.
Oh, Dylan Scott, man.
Yeah. So he won Dallas. And it was so funny because we were in the warm-up area as the pro individuals were warming up. And me and Jason were talking about like the typical body type that seems to be like very common in like the really, really good athletes. Mm-hmm. And Dylan was like, you know, kind of like, he was in the warm-up area, like essentially like showing everyone like how to do stuff. He was being super helpful. It was super cool. But like super tall, lanky, but like clearly also strong athlete. And that stuck in my head. And it was funny because now I follow him on social media, and he put out that post like asking for a pro doubles partner to do a race with. And man, it was cracking me up because he put that post where he was like, I found who I'm going to do it. You guys might confuse us on the race course. And there's the one with the glasses. And I was like, oh man, that is good. That is hilarious. I'm excited to see the two of you do that, man. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm really pumped as well. I think kind of what I was referencing beforehand, there's so many folks with like world-class expertise who are just really cool, normal dudes. And if you're willing to throw down with them, and you guys saw it, like a bit of it in that culture. Jason, I know you've done stuff in all sorts of other different spaces as well, but like across the board, I think the barrier to entry is a lot lower than people think, because the sense of community that we all, you know, found when we started doing CrossFit and found in all these other spaces that we've gotten involved in, like it's a pretty basic standard part of being not even American, just whatever. It's like a regular person who enjoys fitness. Like, you want to help other people get better at their hobbies. And he's a good example of that. So even though he will be making me run pretty close to my 1K PR for 5 miles, hopefully he'll take some time to have some grace and show me what I need to be getting better at when we're out there.
Dude, so I have so many questions on a variety of things, including jiu-jitsu and whatever. But while we're on the High Rocks subject, when I did our High Rocks in Dallas, Gabe is a much better runner than me. I had hit like a fast mile time, the previous weeks or so, but that running 1 mile for time is much different than running 8K and doing these obstacles. But man, I was sludging, man. And, this guy, he gets to recover. And, I had to help out on some of the obstacles, but he was able to take on a lot of the like burpee broad jumps and some stuff like that. Gave me some time to recover. Have you talked to, his name is, what's his name? Dylan.
Dylan Scott.
Have you talked to Dylan about like, what's funny, dude? This guy, Dylan, he was the guy like in the blue shorts, right, Gabe?
Yeah.
Dude, I remember because we were watching, Nick Bear. And because Nick Bear is a friend of ours. So I was like, oh, I'm going to watch the pro individuals. And bro, I watched your boy, Dylan. He was just different. I mean, he started off and you could tell this dude is not going to slow down for an hour. So have you talked to him about what the expectation is for like how fast you need to run? Because that dude he was moving.
He gave me the numbers that he wants us to try to hold for the 1K. I didn't really have the heart to tell him that I just don't think I can do that. So we're gonna go out there. We're gonna give it a heck. He also told me, he was like, I'm gonna start and end every station. It's funny too because I've been on both sides of this now. This will be High Rocks number 4, and I've always done pro doubles when I've done them because I like hanging out with people and like learning from the experience. And for just one of them, I was the guy, and I'm not going to put anybody on blast, but one of them, I was the guy who was like, just keep up with me. I'm going to start and finish every station. You just hang on and hold on tight. And then for the other 3 that I've done, it has mostly just been me getting dragged, which is why I did not do one for 4 years, because the first one I did with Hepner, who's also gone and done a bunch of other fun stuff. Jacob dragged me so bad in that event. Like it was the highest level activity I ever registered on Whoop. Like training for the games, all that sort of stuff. Never hurt me as bad as one High Rocks on that day did. My heart rate was like 183 for 35 minutes or something. All the pictures, couldn't use any of the pictures, so my face was like punch drunk. So it's a lot better to be on the other side, but for some reason I keep picking partners who make me as like the test dummy who's just getting dragged around.
Oh man.
So why do you think that is? Like, you brought up, I think you and I, we have a lot of similarities in the sense that I have a lot of interest in things outside just the sport of fitness. And that really has sparked as I kind of matured out of the sport and I retired from competing professionally. I got really interested in jiu-jitsu, super interested. I got really interested in tactical games and things like Hepner's really interested in. And like, whenever I'm in these other communities, and I witnessed this in CrossFit too, like going out and meeting with the gymnastics coaches or the Olympic lifting coaches, or you name it, everybody always seems to be super welcoming. And maybe it's because of our background and the fact that we competed professionally in CrossFit, whatever. It just always seems like, dude, if you're a pro level at whatever you're doing, in general, you're not afraid to deliver information to other people. Have you experienced that same thing where like, dude, people aren't holding back thinking that Chandler Smith's going to take them down at a High Rocks. They're saying, hey man, I want to level you up. I want to show you my sport. And because they realize it's good for everybody. Has that been your experience as well?
100%. And I do think that's a big difference between folks who are maybe at the highest levels. Like there's no fear of you copying what they're doing and maybe doing it better than them. They know that the execution and consistency and time they've put in has made them good enough to where not anybody can just come and take their spot. And I think they also recognize there's a recognition across different groups, whether that's like elite military units or folks in high level sports, whatever, anything that's really hard to do. I think there's an understanding when you see something else that's hard to do. Like I can watch an NBA basketball game and I like might not understand how difficult a shot was, but you can tell that it was hard and there's a respect there just for something being done at a high level. It's the reason why, you read business books from high level CEOs and things like that. Even as an athlete, it might not be the exact same thing, but there's enough of a carryover in the mindset and the sacrifices that's taken to get to that skill level that I think any sort of idea exchange that's going on between folks who've reached success in one space is bound to be useful for someone else in another space as well.
I also think, and maybe you guys can speak to this more than I can because you've competed at a higher level. I think that like a true competitor, or at least something that I admire in a competitor, is wanting to beat the other guy at their best. Like you don't necessarily want to have like the strategy or the cheat code or whatever. Like you want people to show up and them have all the things that you had, and then you beat them fair and square per se. So I think there's a little bit of that too. It's like, you don't want to just do better because you knew how to break stuff up or whatever, right? Like you have no problem sharing that. Like if you're going to win, you're going to win because you were able to like, put it all out there. So I think there's a little bit of that too.
That reminds me of something, and I never went to any of the super swoopty like military schools, but for my buddies that have gone and done all the like the really cool guy stuff, one of the things that they said, and then that I've noticed since as I've gotten older and watched like subsequent younger folks go through, is the people who go just to get through the course. Like Ranger School is the one a bunch of my buddies went to, and 62 days long, but lots of times you'll end up redoing a phase, doing what they call like a recycle. And lots of the guys who go in there planning to go through in 62 days, like they might still recycle, but they make it through. The guys who go in like planning for a recycle, those are the guys who don't do it. And then you have some folks who like plan to go and dominate, and then they, maybe they make it straight through, but realistic, like I think it transfers over to CrossFit or any other space that you're in, where if you're training to dominate, like that's the only way to be dominant is to train to dominate. And then you might train to dominate and run up to your genetic potential or have other things happen outside of it that lead you to just win. But the only way to win is by training to dominate. And the only way to do well or like even make it to that place is to train to win. And if you're just training to do the bare minimum and relying on luck, like every now and then a fluke can happen, or you can run into the perfect set of circumstances or workouts or situations that allow you to do well. But if you're just doing the bare minimum over a long enough period of time, that's not going to bear itself out, and you're going to lose. So like you have to kind of train, plan, and like aim a level above what your actual goal is, because things have a way of happening that kind of mean that you end up doing a little bit worse because everybody else is also training really hard. But if you're only going in expecting to meet the standard, you're probably not going to meet the standard at all.
Dude, 100%. You've been competing in physical activities for a very long period of time. So let's just talk from wrestling on, right? Because wrestling at West Point in college, like that's a pretty big deal. Like you say it to anybody, like, yeah, dude, that dude's legit. But now here you are all these years later, because how many years has it been since you were a freshman in college till today? Like
14 years.
14 years. So at a high level, you've been competing in one way, shape, or another, right? Whether it was collegiately in wrestling or getting to the CrossFit Games or Wadapalooza or the Dubai, or you name the competition, you've been competing high rocks for all these years. What makes you want to continue to do that, especially now? Like what do you think is internally driving you to go and sign up for another high rocks with this guy, Dylan? Why would you want to do that? Like, what's the benefit for you? And why is that a part of who you are as a competitor? Because, I'll pause there.
I think and it's probably, maybe it's different for you as someone who's been a champion, but as someone who has been a high level competitor, but never been I've won events and won competitions or tests, but never won like a big full title. It feels like you can't ever close the door on, wanting to be great and see like if there was another thing that you could have done to become a champion, because no one who competes at a super high level for a long time is doing it. Like it's a job, and I enjoy that part of it. And I also enjoy the competing side of it, but I've never fully felt like I could be done competing until I've, at least given everything I could to become a champion and like learned whether or not that was completely possible or not possible. But I guess it's just like, and there's no reason to stop. I haven't won anything, haven't done anything, deserving of saying, oh, I've achieved this and I can be done. I think I had a little bit of that feeling a couple of years ago in 23 after I took top 10 at the games again. That was the second time that I'd done it. I was kind of like, well, this is probably about my limit here. And it's a bit of a bummer that maybe I was not good enough to be a champion in the CrossFit Games, but all right, can we try to be a champion team? Can we branch out and do something else? Like there's still things to be won and lessons to learn that can be passed on to people down the road. So if I stop now, I'm maybe not fully using all the talents that I have. And I won't be in the best possible position to share those things with my family or whoever I'm coaching down the road or all that stuff. Like I owe it to those people, and I owe it to the people who invested in me at the beginning to really see like what is maximizing the talents that I have look like. And if I feel like I've done it in one space, then you got to reach out to another. Cause I think the most unique physical talent I have since I started wrestling in my freshman year of high school is that I like to hurt physically. And that, maybe it could work for a job if I was like a paralegal pulling 80 hours a week or something and, staying up late to read. Like there's some crossover into the regular business world, but really it mostly pays its benefits in how you can do with physical pursuits. And there's still other physical pursuits to chase. So I'm going to keep getting into them, keep learning from all the different ones. And even if I never am a champion of something, down the road, I'll be able to share that with everybody who's in my life, because I wasn't closed-minded and didn't want to learn from people because they were better than me or because I was afraid to lose, whatever. Like I will have reached out with as much, like through as many of the connections that I have as often as I could to learn as much as I could about what it takes to be a competitor and a champion. And that'll make for better athletes and better people, as Ben would always say, for anybody that I come in contact with long after I'm done competing.
I love that. Chandler, as an outsider looking in, it seems like, and I think part of like everything that you said about Noah and hanging out at Noah's house, it seems like you're still like really enjoying, like genuinely enjoying competing. And even what you said about, doing high rocks, like hanging out with people, like it seems like it's still very much something that you like genuinely want to do, not feel like you need to do. 14 years in it, man, like that's a long, long time. What has helped you both from like a psychological, like just still fired up perspective, still enjoy what you're doing? And also I'm curious, like, what do you think has helped you longevity wise, like physically? Like this stuff isn't easy on the body. Like you're still going. Anything that has helped you particularly in that side of things too? I'm curious.
Well, I definitely have a lot of people.
Is that Noah?
That was Noah.
Noah, let's go, baby.
He's bouncing around. He's a busy guy. Wodapalooza week. I think there's a couple things. Like physically, you're going to get dinged, but there's a lot of lessons from wrestling. There's the old Dan Gable quote about once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. But really, what it gave me was a lot of practice runs and learning how to deal with ups and downs. There's a lot of lessons that happen just within the act of getting to the mats and starting a match that can kind of be extrapolated for the rest of your life. And one of those things is that like sometimes you're going to slump or you're going to have like a bad time, and whether that's an injury that you can't really predict or whatever, something's going to happen. It's going to slow you down, but your mindset has to immediately shift into what's next. And West Point's really big, especially on using sports as a tool to build better officers. And I think that mentality specifically is something that's preached throughout all the programs at school, because you're going to have disasters going to strike or something tragic is going to happen maybe when you're doing a mission, and you can choose to sit down and respond to it, or you can trust that you've trained and are capable of making the next best right decision. So that's kind of always been the approach. I get hurt, get injured, just like everybody else, but you can, if you have the right perspective or have that as a perspective, then it's not something that really keeps you down. So that's it from the longevity side. And I think it's kind of all I know on the other side of things too. Like I know what's something I feel like is a little bit different from me versus some of the other athletes is that I had a normal regular career, was a U.S. Army captain, and that kind of blended in with the start of my full-time fitness pursuit career. But I know what's on the other side of the other option is, and I did a rotational deployment. I've worked longer hours than I wanted to, stateside, spent time away from my family. So there's times where my body's going to hurt and I don't feel like doing exercise or whatever, but it sure does beat what the other option is. And I'm super, super blessed and grateful because I know what it could be. So I think that has a way of, kind of knocking some sense into me whenever I'm like, man, why am I doing this? I could go do something else and my body would hurt a lot less. And it's like, yeah, but how much would you be happier? Would you get to do all the crazy things that you've got to do in the last decade? And the answer is definitely no. So then you get your butt back on the bike and you figure it out.
Dude, that's such a powerful takeaway, what you just said. And not even just for people like, I could totally relate to that because I am very blessed in the same way, and Gabe in the same way too, right? Like we get to do a lot of this stuff that we really love. But even if you're not in like the fitness space or whatever, even just taking what Chandler said and like reframing the way you look at things, I think is so powerful because like, I just think that your outlook on your current situation is such a blessing, right? Like you look at it like that. And I think that if people can reframe their current situation, look at the positives in it, is great. And if they have something they want to change, making a change, of course. But like, dude, I thought that was a really solid way to look at things, man. And do you think, I wrote this down, do you think those lessons come from wrestling like at an early age? Do you think that, and then, because how often are you doing jiu-jitsu now compared to, how often do you do jiu-jitsu now?
For the last year, because of the longevity thing, it's been a lot less. There was a time where I was going 3 times a week, like within the last couple of years. I was training pretty regularly when I was in Boston and in Louisville and in San Diego, kind of what you're talking about longevity wise. I broke my wrist like 3 days before quarterfinals in 2023. And it's either you're going to say your season's over or you find a way to get it done, and found a way to get it done. And there's been a couple other injuries that have happened since then. Just goofy stuff that happened. And it's like, you got to be smart, because the only thing that matters is being able to show up on game day. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you if you're hurt or sick or whatever. I've had those things happen as well too. And like the only way that you're getting paid is if you go and do the thing. So you just figure it out. And that's kind of taking a little bit time off of jiu-jitsu, but I will say that is my number one thing that I come back to, because I love the mats. Like I enjoy training, and doing functional fitness is great. And I won't say that's really that fun, but I have a lot of fun on the mats and I really enjoy it. So that is something, as soon as I am healthy enough consistently to put that back in my schedule 2-3 times a week, then that's the first thing that's coming back.
Coming from your perspective, being unique, right? I didn't wrestle in college at a high level like you did. But I've been doing jiu-jitsu now for 9 years. And I know that the blessing it's provided me have been immense. I'm curious, do you think you could get the same thing from wrestling and jiu-jitsu because you've done both? Or do you think that they're just, like for example, if you're a parent right now and you're trying to get your child into something, I'm a huge advocate of wrestling, of course. I think it's a foundation to jiu-jitsu, but I'm just curious, like if they don't like wrestling, they go into jiu-jitsu, do you think like they're same or not really?
Yeah, they're two sides of the same coin. Maybe the difference is that some of the, specifically for kids, the like childhood wrestling programs have existed for a little bit longer. So there's maybe less growing pains with knowing how to run a kids program or trying to work around kids cutting weight or doing things too advanced. Like there's a pretty agreed upon curriculum. And I think that's something I think about a lot with CrossFit, that, folks are still trying to figure out what the minimum effective dose is. Like, are we overtrained? Are we undertrained? Do we need to train more of this, less of that? When things are new, it's tough to know exactly what the right usage of every tool is. And for wrestling, there's been a little bit more reps, but if you're on the mat, the humility you're going to learn from when you do lose, because everyone does lose, the increased mental acuity you get from learning new skills and applying them to your body, and also trying to remember them, and learning how to study, learning how to, communicate, that how to get help, how to ask for help. There's so many lessons that I think about, specifically scholastic and youth programs for kids grappling, that I think as long as you're on the mats, that's good time. And for me, it's the same. Like if I'm back and I'm wrestling with the guys back up at West Point again, like that's good training for what it offers there. Maybe there's slightly more of a cardio demand from wrestling side than there is in no-gi, but then it's just the same reason why you'd go to both no-gi and gi classes. Like there's things to be learned. They're all kind of teaching the same thing. Some of them highlight different parts of the journey a little bit more than others, but I honestly feel like that applies to any martial art. Like the discipline, the skills, the bonding lessons, all that sort of stuff is happening as long as you're in there. So you just got to get in there and get on the mat in some form or fashion.
I'm curious, because I've heard this. So I don't do BJJ yet.
Not yet. I was gonna say
no, not yet. Not yet.
You're close.
As someone that came in as a very high level wrestler, because you always hear, at least because now I follow a bunch of jiu-jitsu accounts because of Jason and stuff. Like there's this joke of like, one of the most dangerous things is like the really good wrestler who comes in. So how was that experience? And was it like super humbling? Because you came in and you're like, hey, like I wrestled at West Point. Like how hard can this thing be? Like how was that experience coming from someone that's done it?
There was a ton of humbling initially, and I had a really great group, luckily, that was able to deal with me as a young, athletic, strong white belt. Most of my jiu-jitsu experience, like I started my freshman year of college because I'm back home, and I was back home from school, and there wasn't a ton of wrestling. There's not a bunch of clubs for adults to wrestle. So I went to Kansas City, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, back home, Jason Bircher, and a couple of the guys there. I think we ended up having 4 dudes from that group. They were training over at another group called HD MMA, and Jason High, UFC veteran, LC Davis, UFC veteran. We had 3 others whose names I'm blanking on right now, but a couple of them are just active. One of the guys just unfortunately tore his bicep. But anyways, all those guys were, we had a bunch of people who were going to go do the thing. Julian Marquez. I'm going to mess up all the names, but these guys were dudes who would go on to be UFC middleweights, heavyweights. And so I was not really that threatening to them. But because of that also neutralized a lot of the athletic advantages that I had, or would have in other spaces. And so I actually had to learn a little bit of game, because I think, and similarly for CrossFit, and this probably actually happened with me in my CrossFit career a little bit too, if you have enough physical talent, then you can kind of skip some of the technical steps that you should be climbing up to get to, if you need to snatch 225 pounds and you're just a real strong dude, you're just going to pick that bar up and it's going to go over your head. And so you didn't really need to learn how to snatch. And so at least in jiu-jitsu, because I had to still take these steps, because I couldn't just immediately go and start beating up on everybody in the gym with wrestling moves, I had to actually learn a little bit. And it's only because those guys were so good. So I was really lucky that we had a pretty good scene in Kansas City at the time.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. That's a really valid point. I mean, on this show, we talk about jiu-jitsu quite often, just because it comes up with a lot of the guests and whatnot. But if you are starting off your jiu-jitsu journey, you could go with privates, but you have to find the right school with the right environment, the right people who are really there to everybody should be there with the intention of being a good training partner and leveling each other up. And, for a guy like Chandler, if these guys are super legit, they're going to take, I'm sure Chandler gave him a look that is unique, something different, and then he was getting a good look from them because they're able to teach him, and it just raises the bar, and I think a lot about that now of what is my role in the jiu-jitsu gym? How can I support people? Like yesterday, I was just working with this new guy, and it's just sharing knowledge and information. And so if you haven't tried jiu-jitsu, if you haven't gotten on the mats in some way, shape, or form, go expose yourself to it. You will not regret it. I promise. I promise. Kind of taking a pivot. Let's talk about getting married. Dude, so talk to us about what, married life has been like. How is that different? And let's just dive in a little bit, relationship stuff and maybe lessons learned from fitness that you're taking into your marriage.
Oh, I think it's more the other way around, that I learned a lot from
married. Yeah.
No, it's all the same. Yeah. So Jesse and I got married June 24th, 2022. I got to say it a lot so I don't forget the date, because remembering your anniversary is important, but sometimes it's hard.
So important.
And it's great. We met through the CrossFit and fitness space, and she's a doctor of physical therapy, super smart lady. And we were talking at the end of my time in the Army. So we were already kind of looking towards fitness, and it's been very cool to kind of move into that space together. She moved to Boston. We got married out there. That was when I was starting to become a professional, and moved to San Diego. She went to the CrossFit Games on a team. We had a teammate quit this last year, and so she ended up being on the team this last year with me as well. And she's actually getting ready to head out to go compete for an event tonight. She's competing in Wapalooza. We've both kind of decided to be more all in this space. But so that's been super beautiful to go on that journey together. But I think it's the most amazing thing. I get this from Noah and from my friends, but it's really accelerated at when you're spending all the time that you end up doing with your wife, is that the personality or the personality or the qualities that I have that maybe are too honed too sharply. If I'm always about this thing has to look like this, or I'm super specific about something, the edges on that specific quality have to kind of get more rounded, because you have to learn how to work with somebody else. And if you're just this super spiky person that nobody wants to handle or be around, then that's not going to be any fun for your spouse and your partner or your partners. So between, being married to her and then also being on a team this last year, I think I've been able to relax and at least bring down some of the qualities I may have been riding too high on, and kind of even out. And then on the flip side too, at least with Jessie, like she's learned to maybe compete a little bit more, and we get to talk a lot and share a lot of lessons maybe that I got from wrestling or the decade and a half, 2 decades of competing that I've had. But it should work where, if I'm up at this level for this thing and I need to be here, she can help bring me down. We kind of can meet in the middle at like this optimum range for a lot of things. And so we've made each other better in a lot of ways. I feel like I get the chance to become my best person at a more rapid rate because of her. And that makes me better outside in the gym spaces as well, because I don't really, I don't think I have enough experience with being a normal person to kind of do well there, between growing up with my brothers, being around the NFL with everything my dad did, all boys high school, West Point. Like it's been a very specific part of the culture that I've been a part of my whole life, but the world's a lot bigger than just macho dude, bro space. And it's good that I speak that language, but there's a lot of other languages I need to speak. And I feel like being married has helped prepare me to be a better leader, friend, person outside of the gym, and hopefully, eventually a parent down the road as well. So I appreciate all the qualities that she shares with me, and hopefully that's made me a better person, at least I think.
Dude, we were just talking about this. It's the single most important decision you'll ever make in your life. It's like, right? Makes sense. It's the person you're spending every hour of every day with, like for the rest of your life. Huge decision. I love that, man. Loved hearing that.
Dude, Chandler, you must have just sped up the entire process of a relationship in some ways, though, because so I'm thinking about it, and my wife and I met really young, 15, and so as we grew up, we became closer, not further apart, which was great. It doesn't always happen that way, but for us, it did. But I like what you said about everybody's got like these sharp, and in particular, you recognizing your background, I think is really eye-opening for at least me to hear. Like, dude, your dad was an NFL coach, right? Strength coach, right? You grew up with brothers. You went to an all-boys school. You go to West Point. Like, dude, you're surrounded by masculinity, like everywhere, and like rigid, like discipline. I imagine that's like the perspective I have, right? And then all of a sudden, you're like, dude, well, okay, that's cool. That's a great characteristic to have, but maybe I'm too sharp in this particular area. And the goal of a good spouse is to like round out those edges. I love the way you describe that, because you're trying to like optimize who you are. And if you're too extreme in one area, that's hard, And so I'm wondering for you, I've competed on team at the CrossFit Games, and I know how that is. It's not easy. It's not easy with people that you consider like really close friends. I can't imagine what it would be like to be your spouse. Did that just fast forward like difficult conversations, or did that bring you guys like, I'm just curious, because like, dude, you're in the heat of the moment, you're trying to win, like you're competing, you're spending all this time together. Was there like friction points you guys had to work through, or was it just like, dude, solid the whole time?
100%. There's some other folks at Invictus who had done the husband and wife team thing before, but even though there were increased friction points, I know a lot of people, and this is kind of a view that comes from the spaces that I've been in. Like, I don't view, any sort of negative discourse or like arguments necessarily like a bad thing. Like, if we're having a disagreement, it's because we care enough about each other or the thing to correct the person or to like want to see them improve. And obviously we had a bunch of disagreements, and there was times where if I didn't do the right thing for the team, or somebody lets the team down, those are definitely harder conversations when that person is your spouse. But it's something to be grateful for, because how we viewed it at the end of all of it, like, didn't have a great result. And there was a lot of, difficulty at the game specifically, but we got the chance to spend pretty much, 22 hours a day together for 9 months. So, there's some couples who hit year 10 and they haven't got to spend as much time together as we have. And you guys said it yourselves, like, it's the most important decision of your life. It's the person you want to spend the most time with. So, if we got the chance to spend that much time together, it would have been sick to go and crush it and for everything to have gone perfectly and stuff. But getting to get all that extra time spent together for all the highs and the lows and just the amount of memories that we got to make by being that close is something that, we're super, super lucky to have had the chance to do. So everything is worth it, even if sometimes you get upset because somebody drops the worm early, or, they have something going on at the event and whatever. Like, there's all those things are bad, but in the grand scheme of things, I got to maybe, add 10% more to my lifetime total of time that I'm going to spend with my wife through 1 year, which is sick.
Dude, I wanted to ask you about something she wrote. I saw this on your social, maybe it was hers, that Jesse's goal, you guys were talking about, if I'm not mistaken, 2025 goals, that her goal was to execute and your goal was to recover. What does that mean? Like, so I was just looking at like that. I saw that, I think it was on Instagram that she wrote that. Like, what did she mean by execute and what did you mean by recover? Do you know what the post I'm talking about?
Yeah. I think it's kind of actually an extension too of what we were saying with like, she sometimes I'm very much a planner, for anything, right? Like we've got all these plans for the workouts we're rehearsing. That's a lot of the Army culture, the football culture of having the first 15 plays, all that stuff. Like that's what I know. So we're going to practice a lot. And that's always kind of been a thing for me to make sure that there's follow through on things. And also too, because if you don't follow through, you guys know how it goes. Your coach is going to get upset, or in the Army, you're going to get yelled at. And that's not awesome. So you want to avoid that. So you figure out ways to execute. And I think, because she spent so much time with me, maybe she saw like a little bit of that. And it was crazy how it came, that those two words came to us, like without there was no like collaboration. And that we just like, what were you thinking? We wrote it down, then we ended up talking about it. And hers being something that I kind of do naturally, and mine is something that she does naturally. Like if she's feeling like she's being overly, stretched, or there's too much on her plate, like she knows how to take the time and slow down. Or if there's an injury, the first decision isn't to try to power through it and see if somehow that fixes it or resets it. And so I think because I've been so proximal to her, I've got to watch her do the things that she does best. And the reason she's been able to make some pretty significant improvements in a short period of time is because she knows how to recover super well. The training hard part is honestly almost easier at a certain point. It's easier to just go and send it, but to have all the other details dialed down, I think that's what a lot of the pros do better maybe than folks who are still learning how to become professionals. She does that super well. And I think I do a good job of executing, or at least, making plans to try and follow through. So we both are trying to be like, take some of the better qualities that the other person has. And I think when you can understand the language that your spouse or your teammate or whoever you're around like speaks, then you're able to be a better version of yourself for them and make the group reach higher highs than they would otherwise. So,
dude, I want to switch gears. I had a question. The competitive scene right now is kind of up in the air a little bit, and you're in the mix, and you have a lot of friends that are in the mix. And I'm curious, I saw that you signed with the World Fitness Project.
Yep.
And you joined the World Fitness Project. Like, I'm curious, like, what is your viewpoint on the overall fitness landscape right now? We had Cole Sager on the show recently. I love Cole. I think he's awesome. And we had him on the show, and we were just kind of talking about the same thing. But I'm curious your take on like, where is the fitness space at right now? What's the World Fitness Project, and where do you see the CrossFit Games going in particular in the future? And other events, like you're in Miami, so I imagine you're going to be going to Wadapalooza soon. Just kind of like your overall hot take on all of this.
Ooh, hot takes.
I mean, maybe not. I mean, whatever. Your take. It doesn't have to be hot.
Okay, so for me, the decision to join WFP was one. Will is involved. He's a guy that I've worked with before. I was super not pleased with how things were handled at the games this year. But thirdly, I think and this kind of will reference back to something we were talking about earlier too. Like, I think if you want to see something improve, and for me, CrossFit is something I love. It gave me a chance to meet my wife, travel the world, do all this great stuff. I think the best way, lots of times, to force people to level up is by having competition, and better competition breeds for better results. Like, that's the basis of capitalism, being like American, as at baseline, it's like competition breeds competency. So from where I stand as somebody who's maybe does not have the wasta, as people would say in the Army, or the cachet to make improvements in CrossFit, I think the best thing I can do, like, in this, what we were talking about earlier, like, what can I do from what's available to me right now from my position? If I am an athlete in this other space they're looking to pay athletes more, or trying to professionalize in some capacity, and CrossFit is not doing these things. Like, if I want CrossFit to do these things down the road, because I know I'm not going to be doing this for another 6-7 years, like, I can do more to elevate the space for people like me. And I think every party has actors that are working on their behalf. So there are people who are super passionate only about affiliate stuff. There's people who are super passionate only about things as it pertains to CrossFit HQ. Like every group needs actors that are looking out for them. But I think when everyone is trying to find the optimal solutions for their specific group, then that allows them to come to the table with like, this is what we need. And whenever those honest discussions are had about what every group needs, like that's how you build a product that keeps everybody happy. Nothing will ever keep everybody happy forever. But at this stage, it feels like the athletes needed some better options. And I think that was like something I felt like I could do from where I was at, to be like, all right, if I'm part of this thing, like how is this? And I think it, honestly, looking at even some of the things that CrossFit has done in the last 3 months with the Athlete Advisory Council and appointing the safety head, and like some of their decisions, like there is some pressure. I think there's some understanding that they did not handle things the way that they should have. I don't think it's enough. Like, I think there still can be more that can be done. So like, that's my job as a WFP athlete, is to, if we go and put together a good show, and the same thing it's been for Rogue or for some of these other events, like if you go and you do a good job, or there's lessons that are learned in these other spaces and they can be applied for the ones that you care a lot about. But I don't know. I feel like it's tough to have talk about these things with nuance, because there is nuance. I feel like people are either hate CrossFit or you love them or something. Like, no, you can acknowledge like there's been a lot of great stuff, but at this point, if you want to see things go forward, from my point of view, which is, could be totally wrong or irrelevant, but from the way I see it, like they need some competition to make them do the right thing for the athlete specifically.
Man, it's such a refreshing take, man. And I clearly remember, and we don't need to go back and revisit that stuff, but like your take and what you shared when the stuff at the games went down was like one of the most, I thought, level-headed, refreshing, and like I appreciated the message as like a fan of the sport. So I think everything you've done, man, I love, and I really respect it. And that mindset is so important, of like, it's not it being anti-CrossFit to join these other leagues or participate in these other events. Like, it's just the competition's good for the ecosystem, and yeah, it's always tough to have the discussion because people can take like one little tiny thing you said and warp it in any way. But yeah, I'm curious to see what this WFP thing ends up being. And yeah, if they put on a good show, man, and it gives more opportunity for the athletes, it's just good for everyone.
Yeah, the way you said it, I think summarizes well. Competition breeds competency, right? That's what you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think competition breeds competency is such a valuable expression. I think if you ask, like you said, it's so American, this idea of like a free market capitalism. Like we need to be able to have competition to level each other up. Otherwise, a monopoly doesn't support the overall ecosystem. And you could say, I mean, there's so many ways you could take that, but I think in general, across many things, competition in general is a good thing, from a pricing perspective, whatever. So what do you think is going to happen? So do you think with the World Fitness Project, my understanding is that it's like more of a season compared to like just a singular event. And so I'm curious your thoughts. I sit on the CrossFit Affiliate Council, and I'm on these calls and I try and shine light on like exactly what I think we should be doing different, simplifying the message. I try and just provide my insight. But I'm wondering, like, what do you see for the 2025 CrossFit Games being in where are they at this year? They're in Albany. Do you anticipate, from an athlete perspective, do you anticipate there to still be the same interest from the top level athletes, or do you think that interest is going to be? Do you think athletes for this year, 2025, and this might change in 2026, but for this year, do you think that the athletes are looking at different events as their kind of like pinnacle, or do you think they're still looking at the games as the pinnacle given the year? And maybe things change next year, but in 2025 that we're in now.
I think, again, kind of bringing it back to economics and how that stuff works, for especially the very, very best folks, I think because the way the prize money system is going to work, like it'll still pay very well to go and win. So I think that people in that, top 5 space will very much still be interested in going, because they'll be like, I have a chance to go and make as much money as there's ever been offered at the CrossFit Games. But for a lot of folks, specifically this year, 20 through 30 didn't get paid. You might not know this because you never were in danger of finishing that low, but finished 21st one year in 2021, and you don't make any money. Or I didn't make any money that year. The last couple of years, everyone at the games gotten paid, but that can be pretty expensive. So I think it turns into a different economic question if you're in the 15 to 30 range, to where there's a chance that you don't get paid by doing this. But then if you make it through the WFP for season 2 or whatever, like there might be more money available there. So I think people will make economic choices because that's the only thing that really individuals can ever be counted upon to do is, work to further their best self-interest economically. I would love to say like everything, I'm not a pure altruist. I don't think anyone is. You want to mix that in with your decisions. Like I think there's moral economics, and maybe some decisions are more moral or correct than others. But that's how I would anticipate things breaking is like top 5, probably have still big focus on the game season. Maybe the next tier after that from 5 to 15, probably do both because there's good money to be made from bouncing around doing both. And then that 15 through 30 might have a little bit more hesitancy than they had in the past towards doing the game season if it seems like there's a chance that they can do it and come out with nothing for the year.
And do you think now with your exposure, I didn't realize you had done High Rocks 4 times, and your first one with Jacob Heppner. I saw a picture of it. Dude, you guys, it was a great picture you shared. So good. And did you know what's crazy about Heppner? So I did my first tactical games, and I thought, dude, he's just super legit. Like Heppner's a really good shooter, and he's a really good fitnesser. And there's just levels to the game, bro. There's just levels to the game. Anyways, back to High Rocks. Do you think that there's a legitimate threat? And I don't want to use, maybe not threat. I hope there's a world where High Rocks and CrossFit, because there's so many similarities, can work together to raise the bar. That's what I hope. But do you see a lot of CrossFit athletes in the future pivoting over to High Rocks? And do you see that becoming a more popular sport long term? Or do you still think between the Wodapaloozas and the World Fitness League, like they're just gonna be 2 separate paths for 2 separate types of athletes? Or do you think they're gonna kind of merge over time type of thing?
I think they will be 2 separate paths, but eventually one will win out, because I think it is it's a choice you make at 20. It's going to take you, I wrote down 2012, I want to make the CrossFit Games 10 years from now. And I made it 7 years later, but like that's the sort of like direction you need for one of these sports that's kind of still in their early stage. I'd argue CrossFit's kind of transitioned to a mid-stage sport now, where there's kind of a more unified body type, but things can change pretty quickly in CrossFit because, if the programming changes, then it favors a new body type. But this early, mid, late stage model is something I'll explain real quick. It's like something I talked with some people in other sports before about, like, early stage is just who has access to the sport. So that's why we got North and South California regionals initially in CrossFit. Like it's very localized because not everybody knows about it. And then regionals, they're more American, but then they start to get some more regions for other places outside. Like it starts to grow. And then mid stage, you kind of start to arrive upon, here are the best practices for training. We got some camps forming, like knowledge is starting to get localized into more spaces. There's certain physiologies that are rewarded. We kind of know what to look for. Like you got to be able to snatch this much, do this much, blah, blah, blah. And then late stage is like NBA, you got to be 6'7". Like everybody kind of fits in this very specific mold. CrossFit's still early enough, or High Rocks is still early enough where I think it's like a early to mid stage mode, but there's guys like Dylan who are super, kind of skinnier athletes, and then folks like Hunter, but generally like they're a little bit taller. They're all within a certain range, but there could be still some way to break the race that hasn't happened yet. And you can tell that because times are still dropping pretty quickly, like year over year. And things haven't finished being standardized. So anyways, for younger folks, like I think they will choose, initially, like I'm going to make a 7-year plan to make the High Rocks Elite 15 versus make a 7-year plan to make the CrossFit Games. But I think they'll start to be less choice down the road, because as High Rocksers get better, like if I wanted to be a professional High Rockser, I don't even know if I could be an Elite 15 guy. I got a little bit too much muscle on these bones right now. And I didn't run cross country in college, just like with the UFC, right? There was a time where if you were your local karate expert or something, like you could maybe make one of the UFCs and maybe even go and win a match. And then it transitioned mid stage to where if you or a high level specialist. If you're Karo Parisian, you're the best judoka in the world, or you're some, kickboxer coming over or something, like you can go and cross over. But now everyone's got skills in all the different, facets and everything like that. And I think that happens with all sports. So initially people will choose, but eventually the sport will start to choose too. Like you and I, maybe we could have done everything in our power to become NFL players, but if you didn't have that right amount of fast twitch muscle or that right stature, it just wasn't going to happen. Like the game's going to start choosing at a large enough stage once there's enough people to choose from. But early on, people can still choose. And I think people can still choose for the time being.
I've never heard it broken down that way. And that makes so much sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Dude, Chandler, like that I've never heard early, mid, late. And the way you described it for athletes having like almost make those decisions now, that's really fascinating. Like the fact that you wrote in 2012, I'm going to go to the CrossFit Games, and it took you 7 years to get there. First off, that's also a testament to your goal setting and how you do that. But looking at body types, yeah, I agree. There's going to be people that are going to be able to start shifting because the body type is starting to become a little bit more well-known in those spaces, but it's not quite solidified yet. Talk to me about, because you said it, I'm curious, like how important do you think is goal setting and in particular writing it down? Is that something you do on a regular basis?
Yeah, I'll never forget in 8th grade, we were getting ready to move.
Back in 8th grade.
I can even go back before that. So when this is the whole big time life story. When I was 6 years old, I remember we did this, you do the thing, like, what do you want to be or whatever. And I was like, all right, I want to like be a football player like my dad. But I like war, and that seems pretty cool too. And I remember that whole first semester, I was like really obsessed with this idea of also being an athlete, soldier guy, like whatever. This is a made up job. That's what you do when you're a kid. And I wrote down that I wanted a book about war, and I got a book about war. This guy, Troy Calhoun, who used to work with the Broncos, became the head coach at Air Force. So my dad was with the Broncos, and I was like, you start to like say all these things and like visualize them, write them down. You're drawing pictures of yourself in uniform, like as an athlete, all these sorts of things. Like, so to me, it's had this like mystical almost power to it. Like if I write something down, I'm like really meaning like this thing is going to happen. And there's plenty of times I fail. Ironically, I wrote down, I want to make games 2022 and 2012. That was the year I went 19, 20, 21, didn't make it 22, and then was there 23, 24. So, like not everything, it's not like everything happens just because you write it down, but I think there is a lot of power. And in 8th grade, before we were getting ready to move to Kansas City, from Denver, there was some stuff going on, and like I was like writing down some goals that I had for what was going to come up next, because one of my mentors had told me like, hey, this is a really important thing. You guys start thinking about what's going on. My mom had given me more or less an ultimatum that I was going to pay for college either through an athletic scholarship or through academic scholarship. So you start writing down like, this is, I just learned what GPA is, but I need this GPA. I'm going to play college sports. I'm going to like do this, all this sort of stuff. So I'm very much a big believer in that, and having some sort of accountability. I think the thing I probably spend the most time with on a day-to-day basis is my spreadsheet for training. But within that, there's, at the top, you freeze the column or whatever the row that talks about, or that has all the goals. Like, what are we trying to do? So everything that happens as I'm scrolling through the days, the years, of tracked every workout I've done since 2013, like everything is there. But above all, there's like the written goals and targets. So you never let those things get too far from your mind. And my wife does it. She'll write stuff on the mirror, but whatever your strategy is, if you have like a frequent reminder of what it is that you're pursuing, and especially through it being written down, I think there's a lot of power in that. And it's probably that level of reminding yourself that every decision is either bringing you closer or further from that goal through having it being written on something that you frequently interact with. Or if you're using the doorway method, which is what I did during college, like every time I walked into the doorway, I was like, strong as shit. I'm really fit. I never quit. And I said it to myself 600 times a day, walking through every single doorway. Like that sort of thing will kind of put you in place to chase whatever you're doing. Cause it's never getting too far from your mind, like what you're actually going for.
So Chandler, right after we get off this podcast, because of everything you said, I literally was looking up, and I'm going to write, because a big goal of mine this year is to qualify for the Boston Marathon. So I'm going to write it right in front of my TV, literally because of what you just said, like right in front of my screen. I'm going to put it in big letters. It's going to be awesome.
That's awesome. What's BQ right now? 254?
So for me, because I'll actually be in the first bracket of masters, it's 3 hours flat.
Nice.
But I probably need like a 5-minute cushion
Okay.
to actually get it. So yeah, like 2:55. So that's a big goal. I'm gonna write it down literally because of what
It's
you
a
just
realistic goal though, dude. Don't sell yourself short because the guy ran what'd you run the half marathon in? 124?
said. Yeah, 128. Yeah.
128. I mean, in casual, bro. He finished the race and he had a Slurpee after him. He was ready to rock and roll.
That's awesome. All right, well, then I'll have to do my part and write it down so I can buzz you about it later in the year.
Heck yeah. All right, man.
Dude.
I'm fired up. I'm ready to run through a brick wall.
Dude, hey, Chandler, man. I know you got stuff going on. I hope you have an amazing you're gonna be headed to Wadapalooza, yeah, right now? Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. I mean, dude, I just feel like every time I talk to you, first off, I just really like you as a human. I like what you stand for. I like who you are. I like your grit. I like everything about it. But then when you come on, you just like drop these like really the way you elegantly like explain some like high level concepts. It's awesome. I think a lot of people got a lot from this show. I want to thank you for being on. And if you're listening to this show right now, dude, send this one. If they're in the CrossFit space, send it to them. If they're in the high rock space, send it to them. If they've wrestled or done jiu-jitsu, send them this podcast, because the only way we're going to level up people out there is by getting this podcast into more people's hands. And so I appreciate all of you guys who listen to the show and who can share this with a friend. Chandler, any kind of final remarks before we close out? Where's the best place for people who are like, bro, Chandler Smith, man, I like what that guy's about. I want to find out more about him. Where's the best place for them to go?
In subverting the normal answer of my Instagram, I'd say if they're on Beyond the Whiteboard, they could see my training. I think a lot of folks think that, and I got my dad's an NFL athlete, right? I'm tracking. I got some decent genetics for doing physical fitness stuff, but they can see everything I've done for the last 12, 13 years. It's all there. So if you want to follow me on that, like the work is there. And I just want to also say thank you to you for being a great example. Thank you guys, both of you guys, for having this podcast. But I know, again, for me, like part of what super motivates me to try to do my best is that there's some dude out there who's watching who's going to be on the podcast I have in 15 years, and maybe if they see me getting after it or doing something. I probably brought this up the last time I was on the show, but I remember specifically the transformation that you'd made in being able to rip whatever that 2K was. Once it was like a 6:16 2K into the marathon row, still to this date, in my mind, one of the craziest things that's ever happened at the games. Lots of stuff is like difficult to measure how difficult that is, but that is an insane feat of, having incredible glycolytic anaerobic output and also transitioning into super high aerobic output at a very early point in time in the sport. So anyways, I was always super inspired, and like that's something that you pass down, and hopefully I'm passing it down. I know like Noah's in between us both, and maybe you influenced him some in a way that's helped influence me, but that role is super important. So I appreciate the opportunity to be put in a spot where I can maybe help influence someone down the road, and always say beat Navy. That's just kind of standard ops.
That's it. Well, brother, hopefully we'll catch up at a High Rock soon or another event. In the meantime, for everybody listening, keep training hard, keep getting after it, and make sure to share this episode with a friend. Let's go.